Hey there, my name is Anthony Romano, and this video is the lean protein myth. So basically, if you're into bodybuilding or fitness or anything, chances are you've been told or you've read somewhere that you have to have lots of lean protein. And I'm going to tell you why that's wrong. I'm going to tell you why, even though wrong is a harsh word, it's highly misdirected after I roll my intro. So basically, if you watch any of my other videos, you know I very much like the ketogenic dieting and low carb methods, right? But that doesn't mean that you have to do them. I certainly believe there's a lot of principles that can be derived from those lifestyle techniques that apply to lots of other health and bodybuilding aspects. So essentially, the one that I'm applying today is the fact that lean protein is better than fattier protein is complete bullshit, honestly. So when we're talking about lean protein, okay, I oftentimes will bring up the example that everybody who's done the whole fitness thing before is familiar with, which is, chicken breast and rice, right? Basically the most cardboard tasting meal that you've probably had before on a regular basis. So a lot of people do this because it's a clean, pure starch, white rice example. Don't do the brown rice, it's higher in lectin content and it's overall harder to digest. Whole grains will always be that way, and oftentimes they'll spike your blood sugar a lot more than white rice or pure starches will. So that's another little thing to keep in mind too. Higher glycemic carbs isn't necessarily a problem unless you're doing lower carb dieting, but digestibility is, regardless of glycemic index of the respective carb. So back to lean protein. The biggest reason why lean protein is a problem, okay, is protein requires energy in order to be burned. So essentially, if you look at a lot of these lean protein sources, they're not naturally lean on their own, right? There's no chicken breast in nature. There's a whole chicken. There's no lean cut of beef in nature. There's just beef. Okay, if you're thinking about the natural human diet and the natural human foods that our ancestors would be eating, it would be very hard to isolate these components of lean protein and separate it from the fat. I don't think our ancestors were concerned about separating the egg white from the yolk, which, by the way, is the even bigger myth and even bigger of a joke, personally, to me, because the yolk is where all the nutrition is contained. That's where all the fat-soluble vitamins are. That's where all the healthy cholesterol is going to be. And you want that cholesterol within the egg. It's all of the beneficial components of the large density LDL, which is what you want, and it has HDL raising effects. So I'll get into cholesterol another time. I talk about it all the time. But as far as protein, right now we're operating on the premise that it requires energy to be burned. So if you're consuming, chicken and rice, you're consuming it with energy. You're consuming it with carbs. In that case, you're not the worst off. But jacking up endless amounts of protein is a problem. So if you've ever looked into any of the, biohacking methods that maybe I talk about or other people talk about on the internet, you may have come across the fact that excess protein can actually be inflammatory. And when it comes to the whole combination of energy and protein, many people are aware of the fact that, sorry, I had something in my ear. Many people are aware of the fact that protein can tax the liver. Okay, protein can tax the liver, and the whole need for energy is going to come down to the liver. The liver is going to need an energy source in order to do this. Protein is often referred to as the most thermogenic of all the macronutrients. It basically costs the most energy to burn. And even if you buy into that premise right there, if you buy into the premise that protein is the most thermogenic macronutrient, right, which is something that many people who, even 1 week looking up fitness YouTube videos may have come across, that inherently implies that protein needs energy in order to be burned, because the burning of it, the act of burning of it in and of itself, requires energy. And this is why when you look at natural sources of food, at least from various proteins, they often come packaged with fats. Fats are the preferred fuel source within nature. There's a reason why we can store endless amounts of fats, and we really can't store more than 1,500 calories worth of carbohydrate in our body. Meanwhile, we can store literally tens of thousands of calories worth of fat on our body because it is the preferred fuel source our body would prefer to have in the event of a famine. Additionally, your brain is made almost entirely of fat. These are things I throw out all the time on my page, but they're important to know because they relate to a lot of the concepts which I draw in, which revolve around a lot of the themes on my page here. So, when we're talking about the lean protein myth, excess protein can be inflammatory. You also want a good amount of energy in combination with your protein intake in order to burn that protein. Now, of course, I am of the mind that fat is generally, and fattier sources of cuts of meat and protein products are more beneficial than consuming it with just carbohydrate, because there's more variables with carbohydrate. You're going to want to take into account what the carb source is. They're not all equal. You know, I can have a Snickers bar with my protein. Actually, I think they make them combined now, actually. I've had them before. The real Snickers bar tastes better. But I can have a Snickers bar with protein in it, okay? And that would be inferior to the digestion effect, which I would get from consuming a fattier cut of meat, because the digestion is going to provide a slow and consistent stream of energy from a fattier cut of meat. And keep in mind, anytime I'm throwing out meat recommendations here, I'm talking about local grass-fed meat products, okay? Anytime I'm talking about meat, I'm not talking about Walmart meat, and in addition to the industrial meat being a lot worse off ethically and, you know, the way they treat the animals, etc., you are going to be doing better for yourself, your own health, and better for the health and the treatment of the animals that you're consuming if you get higher quality meat, being grass-fed, pasture-raised animal products. So when we're talking about protein, whatever you decide to eat, however you like eating, consume your protein with an energy source. You need it in order to prevent excess inflammation and to actually use the protein in order to create amino acids in your blood. So last little side note I'll throw in here, because I've covered the fact that it's thermogenic also, and the fact that it appears as if it's meant in nature to be consumed with an energy source, given that so much protein is packaged with fat. You'll very rarely find a protein that naturally occurs alongside a carb, unless it's an indigestible protein, like example gluten or wheat proteins or lectins, plant proteins. So that's another thing to keep in mind. But this is where the concept of a lot of the ketogenic dieting principles will play in regardless of your diet. That being, having fat with your protein isn't a bad idea, especially if you get it from high quality sources. And that's how picking fattier meats can also contain higher nutrient quality, because especially if you get better quality food, you're getting better fat soluble vitamin content and better hormone precursors like vitamin D, like cholesterol. Both are required to make hormones, particularly the cholesterol. Now, last thing I'll tie this into is, if you came to my page for the golden era bodybuilding techniques and the connection with that, perhaps some of you have even seen my collaboration with the golden era bookworm, right? Great videos we're making in the process right now about the golden era trainer, Vince Gironda, okay? So Vince Gironda, in case you aren't familiar with him, this guy is a genius, and he's been the trainer of all the stars. That was his nickname. He was the Iron Guru. He trained Arnold, Larry Scott, a lot of classic bodybuilders. And he was very strict. If you didn't listen to what he said, he would kick you out. And this is one thing he actually preached as well. I actually had just, over the time, I was lucky enough that Carlos from Golden Era Bookworm had sent me one of Vince's books, right? And just for free, and I very appreciate that, Carlos, if you're watching. And one of the things I wanted to make a note for was, I'm almost at a point where I'm looking through to see, okay, you know what? I'm aware that Vince Gironda was a genius, but let's see if he talked about the digestion of protein. Of course, there's mention of it. Of course, there's mention of these other understandings which Vince had pertaining to fat and energy needing to be consumed with protein in order to be used effectively. So if you came here for the golden era influence, it absolutely ties back, because Vince Gironda, who is somebody who, at least if I'm going to say a lot of his methods will tie into the modern day ketogenic dieting principles, the modern day principles of metabolism, there's a connection there. Okay, this doesn't mean you have to do full keto dieting, even though I think it's great and you'll probably enjoy it, even if you think you might not. There's stuff to be learned here, okay? So that's it, and leave me some comments and questions down below. I will answer you. Thank you again for watching. My name is Anthony Romano. Go to my website, romanoketo.com, if you want keto coaching. Going to be dropping some keto programs on there very soon. And follow my Instagram, and like the video, and subscribe to me. Do all that right now. Okay, peace.